Our Constitution was designed with three co-equal branches, so the power of each would be limited or checked by the other branches, creating a balance of power.
I guess the branches act sort of like umpires for each other.
Right. The president is the head of the executive branch, and the Constitution empowered him to enforce the nation's laws. He's also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and our ceremonial head of state. You know, a really big wig.
Yeah, now he wore a really big wig. And check out those Supreme Court justices.
They're part of the judicial branch, Harlan. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land and is called upon to interpret laws as they apply to the Constitution.
And last, but certainly not least, are the congressmen and women who are members of the House of Representatives and the senators who make up the Senate.
That's right. The House and the Senate together comprise the lawmaking branch of the federal government, the legislative branch. I'm impressed you remembered, Harlan.
How could I forget? It was drilled into me as a small child. Anyway, tell me more about these checks and balances.
Well, as I was saying, the three branches are co-equals and can check each other's powers. This way, no one branch can become too powerful. For example, any legislation that is passed by Congress must also be signed by the president before it can become a law.
When we say Congress, we mean the legislative branch, right?
Right.
Well, how can they check the president?
Suppose the president decides to veto a law passed by Congress. Congress can override his veto with a 2/3 majority vote.
Check. Sorry, just like saying that.
As I was saying, the legislative branch must also approve or disapprove appointments made by the executive branch.
The president.
That's right. For example, the Senate must approve or disapprove the president's appointment of a Supreme Court justice. In that way, the legislative branch has a check over both the executive and the judicial branches.
And speaking of the Supreme Court, they're part of the judicial branch, right? What kind of checks do they have?
Well, when reviewing lower court decisions that have been appealed, the court may be called upon to interpret laws passed by Congress and signed by the president to be sure they are constitutional, that is, fit the language and spirit of our Constitution. In this way, they can check the legislative and executive branches.
Check. Sorry. Well, even I can see how this checks and balances system really seems to work, Marie.
Another principle behind the Constitution is federalism. In the federal form of government, powers are divided and shared between the national, federal, government and the state governments. In theory, both parts of government are equal partners. In practice, this is not always the case. The last of the 6 principles is the rule of law. This principle ensures that the Constitution of the United States is supreme and all individuals are accountable under the law. Ultimately, no one is above the law. Well, now that you know the basic principles behind the Constitution, what is actually in it? The national government is organized according to the first 3 articles of the Constitution. Each of these 3 articles establishes the 3 co-equal branches of government. Article 1 established the legislative branch of the national government, setting forth the two houses of Congress to make laws. Article 2 establishes the executive branch to carry out the laws passed by Congress.
Following the preamble, there are 6 topics, or articles, that explain how the new federal government and legal system will work. For example, Article 1 says that the power to make laws, all legislative powers, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Article 2 says that the power to lead and make important decisions, executive power, shall be vested in a President of the United States of America.
Article 3 creates the United States Supreme Court and empowers Congress to establish lower federal courts to interpret the laws.
Article 3 says that the power to make the most important legal judgments, the judicial power of the United States, shall be vested in one Supreme Court.
Although Benjamin Franklin claimed that the Constitution was the most perfect document that he had seen, the framers allowed for a process by which it could be changed. The amendment process provides a way that the Constitution can remain responsive to the needs of a changing nation. It is the main reason that our Constitution has lasted so long. So far there have been 27 amendments over the last 230 years. Not too bad if you ask me.
What if we want to make more amendments?
Well, Article 5 of the Constitution established amendment procedures, so the Constitution can be modified as necessary.
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Well, you certainly have the right to. This ought to be good.
All men named Harlan who have reached their 25th birthday shall be given a tax-free income for life.
Ellen, that makes a lot of sense.
To me. Oh, wait a second. There. That ought to improve my chances. So, how do I get this amendment, as you so constitutionally put it, ratified?
Well, you either have to convince 2/3 of both houses of Congress.
The House of Representatives and the Senate, right?
Right, to propose your amendment.
Sounds unlikely.
Sounds impossible, or...
Yeah, what's the other way? Any easier?
Afraid not. The legislatures of 2/3 of the states would have to apply to Congress for a constitutional convention for